upset and they're letting their displeasure with humans be heard. I don't know what they're upset about, but yeah. Where did I put my water? I had a bottle of water. Where did I put it? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm looking for my bottle of water. There it is. I may need that. Typically, I try not to have a bottle of water or anything to drink when I'm broadcasting because, well, I'm usually talking the entire time. But when I'm doing review work, well, I mute the mic and you're listening, so then I can drink all I want. So, all right. I think we'll be ready to go. Oh, wait, YouTube started. I forgot to go turn off the live chat. Oh, wait. Okay, good. Notifications, no, nothing. Oh, wait. Okay, I think I'm good to go. All right, here we go. Do a search for Theology Central. Here we go. Okay, I think I'm good to go. How do we sound? Test 1, 2, 3, test 1, 2, 3. I got to wait to hear myself. Here we go. Okay, we sound okay. Turn off live chat. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go live here in a second, and hopefully we have a good evening. All right, well, I don't really need any notes here, so let's just do this. All right, ladies and gentlemen, without any further delay, we go live in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Looking at our world from a theological perspective, this is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, November the 11th, 2025. It is currently 6:07 p.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from the Theology Central studio located right here in Abilene, Texas. Now, do you think I can say it right? Do you think I can? If you listen to the last episode I did, obviously I can't say anything right. If you listen to the last episode that I did, the Sermon Audio Daily, there's a word that I have used 8 billion times in my preaching and teaching life. And for some weird, forget preaching and teaching, going back to Bible college, seminary, Bible institutes, I mean, I've used the word 1 million times, and all of a sudden in the Sermon Audio Daily episode, I said it perfectly at the beginning, and then all of a sudden I just could not say the word correctly, and that's the word eschatology. Now, all of a sudden I can't say eschatology. Eschatology, I don't, all of a sudden I just lost it. And you talk about frustrating because the Sermon Audio Dailies are pretty short episodes, right? So you don't want a situation where you're trying to say the word eschatology and you're like, and you can't, it's like I all of a sudden I got stuck or I don't know, was malfunctioning. I don't know what was, there was some glitch in the matrix. I don't know what was happening, but yes, we talked in the Sermon Audio Daily episode. I gave you basically 4 sermons on eschatology dealing with Matthew chapter 24. And the reason I did that is because we have been reviewing, a almost 3-hour long, they call it a dialogue/debate. And the title of it is Deeply Rooted Eschatology Dialogue. All of a sudden, I can't say the word again. Deeply Rooted Eschatology Dialogue. And it's kind of a dialogue, kind of a debate. We have been working on, we've done now, this is part 3, I think. Yeah, I think this is part 3. And so we've done over 2.5 hours of review and critique and analysis. It's been somewhat frustrating, right? Because the first person to speak gives their 50-minute opening statement, 50 minutes long. And I think probably about 30 minutes of their opening statement is a winding road of just, I mean, some things are not even historically accurate. It talks about Luther nailing the 95 Theses. It didn't talk about even how that is greatly questioned. he kind of went after Catholics and how they handle certain issues related to eschatology, but he seemed to imply that their approach to Matthew 24 would be one to read Matthew 24 as apocalyptic literature, symbolic, and I demonstrated by pulling up some Catholic commentaries that's not even an accurate way in which Catholicism handles it, that Catholicism would see Matthew 24, at least the very first part of Matthew 24, probably verses 1 through maybe all the way up to 22. They may approach that as these are the verses that are very specifically related and prophesying and predicting things that would happen leading up to the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. But he didn't really fairly represent that. But then, so it was just a lot of issues. And his thesis really is always reforming, not really anything about Matthew 24. Finally, in the review, in his opening 50-minute statement, he starts dealing with Matthew 24. And it was a little bit frustrating because he did acknowledge 70 AD, but it looks like where he was really trying to focus is Matthew 24 is pointing to the future for us. It may have had something to do with 70 AD, but it's about the future. And where he really kind of used to prove his point was Matthew chapter 24, verse 21, where we read, "For then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be." And I think that's a great verse to go to. But if verse 21 seems to be pointing to something future, you can't forget, though, the verses leading up to this have clear connection to the situation, the history, the timing, events, and things leading up between 33 AD and 69 AD. So it was, I was glad he jumped to 21, but he seemed to kind of use that to almost diminish the significance of 70 AD in light of this discussion or what Jesus had to say in Matthew 24. Now, we ended it right when he got ready to jump to verse 34, where we read these words, Jesus speaking, "Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled." Well, that's a major hermeneutical challenge, because there you're at the end of this entire section, and Jesus is saying all of this has to be fulfilled for this generation. Well, then that raises all kinds of hermeneutical problems. And what I want you to see from this is you can go grab specific verses and pull them out of Matthew 24, and you can try to make them the basis or foundation for your argument for your particular hermeneutic. Everyone has to admit this. Matthew 24 should not be interpreted or approached based off your team's eschatology. It should not be. Your eschatology is irrelevant. Your eschatology doesn't matter. It's about the meaning of the words and the text and the history of Matthew 24, not your eschatology. It's what is your hermeneutical principles that you're going to apply to the words found in Matthew 24. It's irrelevant to your eschatology. In fact, it's the words of Matthew 24 that should lead you to your eschatology. And I will argue that in many cases, the text in so many areas doesn't fit so nicely with one team's eschatology, with one team's systematic theology. Everyone wants to take the text to mold it, to make it support their eschatology or their systematic theology. But it never works that perfect. So we're going to try to finish this. The goal here is to finish this. The first speakers, it's Pastor Reynolds, David Reynolds. He's the one speaking. It's the goal here is to finish his opening 50-minute statement. That's the goal, is to finish it. And he's now going to look at Matthew 24, verse 34, and deal with this generation. Now in this particular case, he's going to have to somehow make it not be the generation that Jesus was talking to, because clearly he's going to argue that all these things in Matthew 24 did not happen for that generation. So then part of these things happened for one generation, and the other thing is going to happen to another generation? Well, it doesn't say generations. He says this generation. So you run into some hermeneutical problems. And as listeners, as people who sit in the pew, as people who go to Bible studies and small groups, embrace the reality that if you truly become a Bible student, you truly become a student of Scripture, you're going to find time and time again that things don't fit so nice and perfect as pastors try to pretend that they do. They try to say, here's what we believe, and well, if you'll just study the Scriptures, you're going to come to this conclusion. If you study the Scriptures, you're going to find that no one theological team is ever really going to be fair to the text because everyone manipulates the text to agree with their theology. And so this is a good example. You've got 21 that's going to mess up verse 21 in Matthew 24 is going to mess up some people's theology. And you've got verse 34 that's going to mess up other people's theology or other people's interpretations. And guess what? The teams show up. They do up the cleanup work to try to make sure there's an explanation so that you can have Matthew 24, have that verse, yet still maintain a eschatology that may actually be contradicted by one of these verses. And that you have to see that game. All right. And and hopefully through this episode, I say eschatology, correct. I don't know. I've gotten into my head about it. I think what's happened, many of you know, was that last Monday, I had some dental work done and I'm still getting used to talking correctly. And for some weird reason today, saying the word eschatology is just causing me some problems. And I think it's getting into my head. It's weird because at the beginning of the day, I was saying eschatology with no problems and all of it. So I know how to say the word. I know the word. I'm looking at the word eschatology. And so if I say it incorrectly, just please forgive me and have a little bit of mercy and a little bit of grace. I trust me, the last thing I want to do is say a word incorrectly. That's the last thing I want to do. And trust me, I'm aware when I say it incorrectly. All right. So are you ready to go back to Shepherd's Rock Bible Church? Their deeply rooted eschatology dialogue. I think I want to say that when I read that deeply rooted, I want to call almost eschatological dialogue. It's like, so if I just say eschatology discourse, I think if I say deeply rooted eschatology discourse, I don't, for some reason I want to say eschatological. I don't know why I want to do that, but eschatology dialogue / debate. Are you ready? Here we go. Let's see. Let's just see where he goes. Again, he's going to focus in now on verse 34. He's got to explain, well, did everything from verse 3 to 33, did all of those things happen for this generation? Or are you going to say, well, some of these happened for that generation, but the other part did not happen for that generation. It's referring to another generation. So what Jesus meant is generations. Oh, you're going to run into all kinds of interpretive problems and hermeneutical problems, which that means whatever system of eschatology you hold to, be humble enough to admit. And whatever doctrinal system you hold to, just admit there's scriptures that cause major problems with almost every systematic theology, which every system of theology, every doctrinal system, every system of eschatology or soteriology or any other areas of study. Because the text, you have to wrestle with the text, and it leads you in many cases to lots of difficult situations. But let's see how he's going to handle it. Are you ready? Here we go.
They wanted to discredit it. They want us to spiritualize the miraculous and the supernatural. They want us to believe the straightforward's murky rather than truly biblically apocalyptic, which is revealing and unveiling, right? In a biblical sense. So was Jesus trying to disclose and answer their questions? Or was he trying to obfuscate things further and make things unclear for the disciples? So then, but Dave, tell us about this generation. What about that? We can go into that a little bit. If you look down verse 33, So also when you see all these things, you know that he is near, even at the very gates. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. And so some people say, see, this generation. Well, all these things, first let's get into all these things. What is all these things? Well, I think all of these things are the things he's been saying to Peter, James, John, and Andrew, because we're looking at him now kind of horsey-eyed because he's really unloaded a lot on them, and they're going, what is... And he's saying all these things that I've been telling you, it's going to be the worst time in history, the abomination of desolation, all these things leading to the end, because the whole passage he's talking about, and then the end will come, and then the end, and then it's coming. Second coming, this chain of events that we just read in the previous chapter, all these things are going to happen. So we can look at it as the contemporary audience, in other words, the generation that is there, the disciples' immediate generation, and that would be a possible thing if those things had actually happened, but they didn't. You can say this generation's a type of people, a generation or rebellious group or whatever, and as he did in Matthew 23, he did. So you can use generation that way. So again, you have to use the immediate context to find out what's he talking about, so what do I apply here? So this is another aspect of looking at it as just generation can mean the generation that what? The generation that sees all these things. That generation that sees all these things will not pass away. If you're going to say like it's a certain group, a certain race, that generation won't pass away. You got the word until you have to deal with. That means that generation, like if you were talking about Israel, and he's talking to the Jews, that generation will not pass away until, then you're saying that, well, eventually the Jews are going to pass away and all that. Israel's going to pass away because what happened to all the promises that are irrevocable and eternal? You know, the Romans 11 stuff. So is it symbolic? It's symbolic of the church age. So I just want to point those things out. And I want to, just for the sake of concluding and wrapping this stuff up here. Verse 37, he's got the coming is there again.
Did he answer the question? He didn't really seem to deal with this generation in any way, shape, or form. So let me just read it to you again. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. And what some people say is when it says this generation, it just means the generation that sees these things, they're not going to pass until all these things are fulfilled. But that just means this generation can be any generation, whichever generation. So you could just be like, well, but wait a minute. That generation that Jesus was talking to did see many of those things fulfilled because many of those things clearly relate to things that happened between 33 and 69 AD. So that generation did see some of those things. Or are you saying the generation that sees all of those things? But then you just make it, well, it doesn't really mean anything. Whichever generation. It's just, that's like a meaningless statement. Hey, whichever generation sees all of these things will be here and like, I don't even know what that means. It just seems like, hey, whatever generation it is, they're going to be here and they'll be here until they see all of it. But it could be any generation. No, it seems to be referring to that generation. Now, some will argue this. Generation could mean race, indicating that Israel as a people will not cease to exist before God fulfills his promises to them. Another possibility is that the word describes a particular era in which people will see the end times. That is, the event will occur so rapidly that all will happen within one generation. Perhaps both interpretations are true. In other words, nobody seems to really know how to interpret it. That should tell you everything, all right? When you're looking at Matthew 24 and pastors are so dogmatic, please note, they even have to admit, well, when you get to generation, well, it could be this, well, it could be that, or it could be this. I mean, we don't really, let's just move on. No. If we can't figure out this generation, and if this generation doesn't really mean the generation Jesus is talking to, and it can just mean, well, it could mean a race. It could just mean whatever generation it is, they're not going to pass away until they see it. if you can just make it say pretty much anything, well, then why can't you just do that with all the verses that come before it? Why do we have to be so dogmatic about the verses that come before it? Is when we get to verse 34, we're just like, well, this generation could be this, or it could be this. It doesn't really matter. No, it does matter. So, I don't know. Strong's definition, I don't know, of the Greek word used for generation here. It's this Greek word, if you would like to know. It's this Greek word.
Strong's G, 1074, Genea.
Genea. Genea is used 42 times. It can be translated generation, time, age, nation. Strong's definition, a generation by implication in age, the period or the persons, age, generation, nation, time. The outline of biblical use, fathered, birth, nativity. That which has been begotten, men of the same stock of family. The several ranks of natural descent, the successive members of a genealogy. A group of men like each other in endowments, pursuit, character, and a bad sense, a perverse nation. The whole multitude of men living at the same time. An age, an ordinarily occupied by each successive generation, a space of 30 to 33 years. Yes, you run into some major problems with 34. You really run into some problems. There's enough there that you can kind of open it up to be anything, but if it opens up to be anything, well, if it can be anything, then it really is nothing. And if it's nothing, then if it falls apart in 34, I don't know then what you do with all the verses that come before. If you cannot ascertain what this generation is referring to in 34, I don't know then what you can be dogmatic about in the verses that come before. I know the one thing that I know, this is where I always go back to. Here's what I do know. If you go back to Matthew 24, verse 1, when there's Jesus, in his incarnation, he's on the earth. This puts it around 32 AD. He goes out, he departs from the temple. That's the temple that is standing in 32, 33 AD. It stands all the way to 70 AD. And his disciples came to him to show him the buildings of the temple. Literal disciples, literal Jesus, literal temple, literal buildings. They're all right there. Jesus says, see ye not these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. Jesus literally looks at these buildings and say, they're all coming down. There's not going to be one stone left upon another. He's referring to a literal destruction of a literal temple and literal Jerusalem. All right. Then finally, he's on the Mount of Olives. The disciples come to him. Okay. And they start asking, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And Jesus begins to explain clearly, no matter how much you want to parse their questions and try to say, well, it's referring to three different things. You can play that little game. At the most simplistic, simple reading, obvious reading is they want to know, when is that going to occur? And Jesus begins to give the signs that are leading to the destruction of the temple, meaning these signs first and foremost would be relevant to that generation between 33 and 69, right? Between that period of time, right? So that generation, the signs are relevant to them, and they point to the coming destruction of the temple in 70 AD and the siege of Jerusalem. There's just no way to get around that. So if you start with the historical context, this generation makes sense. Now, if you want to say, well, some of it refers to that generation and some of it refers to another generation, then it would be these generations. It would be, God can't get the plural right. But he moved on quickly, but I guess he's almost probably out of time. He would have had far more time if he wouldn't have done all the wandering and crazy things he did at the beginning. Hopefully we can wrap this one up, and then in our additional episodes, we can hear the next 50-minute opening statement from the pastor who's approaching this from a completely different interpretive perspective.
Verse 38, he talks about until the day when Noah entered the ark, and until the flood came, they weren't aware of what was going on. And so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Verse 42, the Lord is coming. Verse 43, the night the thief was coming. Verse 44, the Son of Man is coming. So all this context is about the end and coming. It's not 70 AD stuff. So he talks in verse 46, and then he comes. The master of that servant, verse 50, will come on a day he doesn't expect. So the whole passage is about the end, his coming. Jesus is grouping his narratives about the finality and closure over a dozen times in this chapter. The language is straightforward for four fishermen, somewhat to grasp, although the epistles and Revelation hadn't been written yet, so they wouldn't get the full thrust of it until much later. So while we can identify the familiar, near, and far prophetic language, Jesus set about to answer their questions about when these things take place. What will be the sign, which, no, I don't know what that looks like, of his coming and at the end of the age. If all this is about 70 AD, then Jesus never answered their questions. Think about that. If things prophesied about Christ at his first coming were all literal, physical fulfillments, what is the precedence for making second coming things symbolic? Most important.
See, he keeps making this argument. You can't make it symbolic. You can't make it symbolic. You can't make it symbolic. The issue in Matthew is the historical context is them asking questions about the coming destruction of the temple that Jesus told them was going to happen. And Jesus begins to give signs, which would have to be clearly in its context interpreted as pointing to the signs of the destruction of the temple in 70 AD. So the issue is that's where you start. So if you start there, then you go through all the signs and go, okay, does that fit what happened between 33 and 69 AD? Yes. Does that fit? Yes. Does that fit? Yes. And we felt like even he had to admit a lot of this can fit pretty good with 70 AD until you get to verse 21. Because then it says, for then shall be great tribulation, such as not since the beginning of the world to this time, no, nor ever shall be. All right. That means something. That one is hard to keep within the context of 70 AD. All right. So then what you say is, okay, nobody's making anything symbolic. Now we have to go, we've got a problem here. It just jumped. So now how do we handle this jump? And how do we also handle the jump? In fact, that when you get to 34, all of a sudden it seems to go back and say, but wait a minute, this generation's going to, or verily I say to you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. That all these things have to be fulfilled for that generation. Well, then you have to start playing games with that generation. Well, if you can play games with that generation, someone can come back to 21 and go, it's just exaggerated speech. It's just hyperbole. But someone could come along and play that game. So the point is, everyone's going to play some game with the text. But it's not about being symbolic. It's about trying to understand the language. I don't know why it's like, oh, you're going to make it symbolic. Do some people make some of this symbolic? Maybe so. But whether they make it symbolic or don't make it symbolic, the issue is we all have to try to understand it in light of that generation, in light of what happened between 33 and 69 AD, and we have to understand it that way. First and foremost, every team of eschatology, every eschatological team has to all come together going, yes, we have to acknowledge the context here is the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, and we have to all work together with academic integrity, historical accuracy to go, that fits. Okay, what about this, guys? We can all admit we've got a problem. Okay, good. So some of us have a problem with verse 21. Others of you are going to have problems with verse 34. All right. And you know what you may have to end up with is no one can be completely dogmatic.
Importantly, to all my Reformed pastor friends out there, we talk about, as I said before, bibliology, theology proper, Christology, pneumatology, all these things you take in a normal, straightforward way. I'm just saying spill out all over into ecclesiology and eschatology too. And that's that. That's all I have to say about that. As Forrest would say.
There you go.
Thank you.
All right. Let's give him a big hand. Thank you for that. And that concludes our, you can take that. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, no time limit on that. And that concludes our first opening statement. We'll have a short 5-minute break, and please try to be back within 5 minutes. Thank you. And I will time that as well. So, okay.
And there you go. That's the conclusion of the first 50-minute statement. It only took us 3 hours to review that 50 minutes. 3 hours to review 50 minutes. Oh, we're off to a great start. But at least we completed it. Look, I don't know. Here's what's kind of frustrating for me. There's a high probability that I'm far more in agreement with him on some aspects of them. Well, actually, no, I'm not. I don't know. I think the issue is there's probably, you put both of them together, I would find things I would agree with both. Like, for example, his insistence that we interpret Scripture in a literal way, that we maintain a separation between church and Israel. Some of his dispensational things he mentioned, I would be very much in his side. But the way he handled Matthew 24, I think to me violates those very principles of holding the text in a very literal, accurate way. A literal, accurate way within its historical context would show you Matthew 24, first and foremost, is about the coming destruction of the temple in 70 AD. So on one hand, I would agree with the way he says we should handle the scriptures, but I believe he violates that and how he handles Matthew 24 because he wants to make it future. Well, you can make some of it future, but you can't just ignore the parts that can clearly be fulfilled in the past. And he wants to say it's just kind of mingled together. Well, that's not hermeneutics. It's just kind of mingled together. We don't really know. And then all of a sudden, he wants a straightforward literal reading, but then all of a sudden, this generation doesn't mean that generation. It just means some unknown future generation who sees all of these things. It's meaningless. It's nebulous. Well, wait a minute. I thought you were all about... See, that drives me crazy. So there's some ways I would probably agree with him on many issues dealing with eschatology. Now, the next person's going to come along and probably handle, I'm assuming, Matthew 24 in a more preterist type way, I'm assuming. And I'm probably going to be in great agreement with him. But then when he gets to passages like, where is it? For as the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth even unto the west, so shall be the coming of the Son of Man. For wheresoever the carcass is, there will be eagles gathered together. Immediately after the tribulation, those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. If he comes along and says, this is just apocalyptic literature and symbolic, I'm going to lose my mind then. Why? Well, because wait a minute, all the things in verse 5, 6, 7, all of these things you take literal. And then all of a sudden you're going to jump to, well, that's apocalyptic and symbolic. Oh, see, that's going to drive me crazy. See, the thing is, I'm not going to agree with any team. And this is why I could never survive. The fact that I made it 23 years in any kind of a ministerial position is a miracle because I'm not built for that. Because in that you got to pick a theological team, and that's what you do in church. You just preach your theological team. And I always thought Imagine Church is not about a theological team. It's a place where we come to open up the Word of God and struggle with it, with or without offense to anybody's theological team. So I can't agree with anybody. I wouldn't agree necessarily with the preterist. I definitely don't agree with the amillennial view in many cases, but I don't always agree with the dispensationalist view. So when it comes to eschatology, I think Scripture should rule, not one's system of eschatology. So I wish I could say something rather profound, but I can't. I mean, In some ways he did. Once he got into Matthew 24, the conversation got disgusting. The discussion got interesting. But he took such a long and winding way to get there. I just feel like he could have used that 50 minutes to do more work on the actual text. Like, you got to have a more strong argument for this generation than what you gave. You just kind of threw out a couple of possibilities and you didn't seem to land on any of them. And he spent so much time about the symbolic. He should have shown how certain systems interpret some of this literally and how they sometimes flip to a symbolic interpretation. Cite commentaries, cite popular speakers, do something it just made no sense ultimately, at least from a polemical perspective. In other words, how he presented it. Hermeneutically, I saw what he was trying to do, but I think then he kind of let himself down in verse 34. So I don't know. How will the next speaker handle it? Well, you'll have to wait till next time because we're not going to go any further for tonight. So we'll stop there. At least we finished it. We finished the 50-minute opening statement. Go back and listen to part 1, part 2. Go download the actual message again. It's called Deeply Rooted Eschatology Dialogue. Deeply Rooted Eschatology Dialogue. Shepherd's Rock Bible Church. And you can go listen to my parts. And I would also challenge you, if you go to Theology Central on the Sermon Audio app or Theology Central on the Church One app, if you look for my series, Bible Study Exercise, and you scroll way up, you got to keep scrolling, you'll finally see my 26 hours plus of my working on Matthew 24. From 2022, 26 hours plus of me working on Matthew 24. I would challenge you to go listen and download all 26 parts because I think it will add to the discussion, all right? And I'm adding these messages in our series that we did on eschatology. I need to finish it. I need to get to the church because I think the textbook I was using is sitting there at the church. I need to get there, see if I can find it. I don't know because I need to bring it here. I was using, was it Ryrie? His systematic theology? I don't know, but I need to get it. So I need, if anybody from the church, go to the church and grab that book. I need it. All right. So, so I'm putting this all in our series on eschatology. I could move all of this to our series on systematic theology, but yeah, you get it. And I'm doing better with eschatology. Am I not with the term? Eschatology. Yeah, see, if I start thinking about it, I think it's that phrase, deeply rooted eschatology debate. Eschatology. I don't know why I was having a problem. It's weird. I think it's trying to speak after the dental work. I just find myself saying different. It just feels weird trying to say the word eschatology. See, now I'm not thinking about it. If I start thinking about it, I don't know what's happening. So, yeah. I mean, I know you don't care about that, but you can tell it bothers me. It's going to bother you. I guarantee you, when I lay down to go to sleep tonight, right? The lights are going to be off, and I'm going to want to reach over. I'm going to grab the iPad, and I'm going to be like, let's go listen to that sermon audio daily and listen to myself not say the word eschatology right. And I'm going to be so bothered that 1 hour is going to turn into 2 hours. 2 hours is going to turn into 3 hours. And I'm going to be like, oh man, I need to broadcast 20 hours as like a form of penance to make up for saying eschatology wrong. I've got to be able to say the word eschatology right. I got to make up for it, or I should delete that and then it'll be 3 a.m. and go redo that episode. And then, well, the people who heard it, they're not going to go back and listen to it. And the new people will not ever know that I messed up the word eschatology. Yeah. Now, from a theological perspective, that is me not taking my failure and my sin and laying it at the foot of Jesus. That's me taking my failure and sin and trying to make make it right by my own efforts, and I can never make my sin right by my own efforts. That's why Jesus came to die for my sin, and I am covered by his imputed righteousness. I could turn it into a theological lesson, but from a psychological standpoint, it's not that simple, because I'm like, I should know the word eschatology, and I should be able to say it correctly. And if I can't, and then what did I do? I try to excuse it by saying, well, I had some dental work. I mean, I did have dental work. I mean, that's a fact. And it is causing me some problems. Fact. But is that making an excuse? Well, okay. Yeah. So, but it just shows that even if we get our eschatology right, we still are going to make a mistake. Right? Even if my eschatology, even if my hermeneutics is right, you see me can't say the word eschatology correctly. So it's just it's symbolic of there's always going to be some failure in our life somewhere. So, all right. I feel like I should say something else. Everyone have a wonderful night. I can say that. And again, since I don't think I'll broadcast again this evening. I don't think I will. But if I don't, to all my fellow veterans, happy Veterans Day. Thank you for your service. And hopefully, you had a good day. All right. And to everyone else, thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting the podcast. And next time, we'll pick up the 50-minute opening statement from Pastor Damon Joseph, from a completely different perspective than David Reynolds gave us. All right, Damon Joseph will give his 50-minute opening statement, and we'll see how he handles Matthew 24 in light of his system of eschatology. Thanks for listening. God bless.